condolences to the Floyd family, but looked at them to express those condolences. The cryptic nature of this new information that he says he believes will give the Floyd family, quote, peace of mind. I'm curious to know what that is, because given the impact statements from the Floyd nephew and the two brothers, I don't see what could possibly come out that would bring them any kind of peace of mind. I believe it was Philonis Floyd who said, quote, my family and I have been handed a life sentence, which I found interesting, especially after Derek Chauvin's mother, Carolyn Palenti, said in her statement, when you sentence to the judge, when you sentence my son, you will be sentencing me. These are very powerful moments in the courtroom where you get to hear definitely the victim statements, but I wasn't expecting to hear from Derek Chauvin's mother. And so I am actually very curious to see how this plays out, especially given what Danny just said about how that might impact the judge. A very, very powerful hour or so that we've been watching, Lester.
And as you know, Jonathan, this has been seen broadly as a watershed moment in the whole issue of race and policing. But once again, Mr. Blackwell at the beginning, for the prosecution, making the point that this was not about policing. This was about one bad officer who ended up murdering someone he was trying to take into custody. So how should we be viewing whatever happens here today?
Well, I mean, I understand what the prosecution was trying to do, trying to make this a very discrete case and have it be on the facts on the ground, following the evidence and keeping the trial focused, keeping the witnesses focused, keeping the judge focused and the jury focused and not distracted by all of the other things that were at play, the politics that got involved, and also how the murder of George Floyd fits into the larger narrative of this country when it comes to African Americans, African American men in particular, and their interactions, sometimes fatal interactions with law enforcement. They, as much as they were able to keep it separate there in the courtroom, out in the court of public opinion, they are intricately linked. The nation was watching nervously when the verdict came down, because of viewing the Chauvin trial as part of the larger narrative. Today, even though those words were said again in the courtroom, the nation is going to be watching to see that one hurdle was reached, and a white police officer found guilty for murdering an unarmed black man. Now, how much time will that former police officer serve for killing that unarmed black man? And if there's one thing that Eric Nelson said that I agree with, no matter what sentence the judge hands down, there will be people on all sides of this issue who quite possibly might not be satisfied.
Most watching at home or in the workplace, but some are watching from across that courtroom. That's where we go to Gabe Gutierrez again, with a growing crowd waiting to hear what the judge hands down. Gabe?
Hi there, Lester. Well, yes, they're continuing to chant Black Lives Matter here, anxiously awaiting the sentence. I'm joined by Athena Papagiannopoulos here, a Minneapolis resident. She has organized a few of the protests here in this community. And why was it so important for you to be physically right here, right now, listening to this sentence essentially in person? You're listening through a speaker out here.
Yeah, it's just important to show that we're still together with the community and that we're going to be here for the community and the family, like no matter what happens throughout the entire process.
And Athena, as my colleague, journalist Don Giulici, kind of pans around and shows the crowd. Athena, what was your reaction to some of the things we just heard from? George Floyd's young daughter, Gianna, gave a message, and so did several of its family members. What was the most powerful section for you? What was the most powerful moment?
It's the fact that she has the strength to be up there doing what she's doing. She's a young black woman, just really a child, and the whole situation is just so beyond heartbreaking. But to have to put someone up there time and time again and constantly be in the spotlight, her presence in general is amazing.
There were some in the crowd here that gave a strong reaction when they heard Derek Chauvin's mother, as well as Chauvin himself, very briefly get up and speak. What was your reaction when you heard that?
I understand when you have a child, you want to back them no matter what, in their wrongs and their rights and what they do. But I just don't have respect for that because he's clearly just going through the motions of this child. So for her to have more emotion than him throughout this entire process in that small snippet, I didn't feel good about it.
And Athena, we were here in this spot just 2 months ago when the verdict came down. There were cheers that erupted here. It seemed like a weight had been lifted off of this community in Minneapolis. What do you consider to be the historic significance of this moment, and what do you consider an appropriate punishment for Derek Chauvin to be?
We can't get the appropriate punishment because, with the laws and everything, but it has to be maximum of what they're willing to give, or else that's just as bad as them saying, no, you don't get it. Because if we get, 10, 12, 13 years, that's them saying that you're not worthy of what I feel my child is worthy of. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. And, just being here with the community just makes it all better, because during that day I couldn't, and a lot of people couldn't take in yet that moment when you heard that yes and all those cheers going on. It's like, yes, okay, that's the first push, but here we are on the final push where it's like, you're going to show us right now during this sentencing what we actually mean as a community and the world entirely, and just the basis of Black lives.
Athena, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Lester, we've been speaking with folks like her really throughout the afternoon, and as you can see, this crowd has begun to gather here, start with a few dozen kind of at the start of the sentencing, and they are now anxiously awaiting this court hearing to resume. But what you just heard from Athena is something we've been hearing over and over again, significant not just for this community, Lester, but obviously across the country. We keep talking to people from Chicago, from Michigan, and also this woman here. Are you from Minneapolis?
Yes, my name is Marcia.
Marcia,
born and raised here.
Sure, born and raised. Why is it so important for you to be here right now?
Gabe, we're going to break away from you. The judge is back in the courtroom.
What you did, not just the people who were in the courtroom here, but also those who provided written statements, both from the Floyd family and the defendant's family. I've read all the impact statements that were submitted earlier and listened carefully to all the input here today. And it is truly appreciated that you took the time to stay with this case and to provide me with input. I have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation and carefully considered all the facts of the case and the law, but my comments are actually going to be very brief because most of it's going to be in writing. I have a 22-page memorandum that is going to be attached to the sentencing order. And why am I doing it in writing? To emphasize the fact that determining the appropriate sentence in any case, and in this case, is a legal analysis. It's applying the rule of law to the facts of an individual and specific case. And that is why, as opposed to trying to being profound here on the record, I prefer that you read the legal analysis that explains how I determine the sentence in this case. What the case is, or what the sentence is not based on, is emotion or sympathy. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge the deep and tremendous pain that all the families are feeling, especially the Floyd family. You have our sympathies. And I acknowledge and hear the pain that you are feeling. I acknowledge the pain not only of those in this courtroom, but the Floyd family who are outside this courtroom and other members of the community. It has been painful throughout Hennepin County, throughout the state of Minnesota, and even the country. But most importantly, we need to recognize the pain of the Floyd family. I'm not going to attempt to be profound or clever because it's not the appropriate time. I'm not basing my sentence also on public opinion. I'm not basing it on any attempt to send any messages. A trial court judge, the job of a trial court judge is to apply the law to specific facts and to deal with individual cases. And so, Mr. Chauvin, as to count one, based on the verdict of the jury, finding you guilty of unintentional second-degree murder while committing a felony under Minnesota Statute 609.19 subdivision 2 paren 1, it is the judgment of the court that you now stand convicted of that offense. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute section 609.04, counts 2 and 3 will remain unadjudicated as they are lesser offenses of count 1. As sentenced for count 1, the court commits you to the custody of the Commissioner of Corrections for a period of 270 months. That's 270. That is a 10-year addition to the presumptive sentence of 150 months. This is based on your abuse of a position of trust and authority, and also the particular cruelty shown to George Floyd. You're granted credit for 199 days already served. Pay the mandatory surcharge of $78 to be paid from prison wages. You're prohibited from possessing firearms, ammunition, or explosives for the remainder of your life. Provide a DNA sample as required by law. Register as a predatory offender as required by law. And you will receive a copy of the order and also the attached memorandum explaining the court's analysis. Anything further from the state?
If this needs to be said, we just ask that it be executed forthwith.
Defendant is remanded to the custody of the sheriff to be transported back to the DOC or whichever custody is currently holding him. Anything for the defense?
We are.
All right. Thank you. We are adjourned.
The judge not reading his full sentencing memorandum and getting virtually right to the sentencing and sentencing Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer, to 22 and a half years in prison. That is less than the maximum, but certainly far more than Chauvin and his attorneys were asking for. Let's go to Gabe Gutierrez right now, who is across the street from the courthouse, where we've been watching a growing crowd. Assume the word is getting there now. What's the reaction you're seeing?
Hey, Lester. Well, I should let you know this crowd is maybe on a 30-second delay from where they've been hearing, so it is just starting to spread through the crowd right now. It was quiet. People are kind of taking it all in, waiting to kind of process, and I'm trying to listen for some reaction now. But the young woman we just spoke with a short time ago, you were just listening to it. So 22 and a half years, the sentence handed down to Derek Chauvin. That is 10 years more than the recommended guidelines. You just heard what the judge had to say. What's your immediate reaction?
I'm taking this as a win for my community right now. We needed this. It could have gone just so far left that there was no coming back. He said, that he's not doing this, for the public, but he knew he really, really had to. It just had to be done this way. And I'm really thankful for my community in the world and just showing that we can't go on like this. But I also take a second back to think about all of the other people this has happened to with the knee on the neck since George Floyd. So I'm taking it as this is a small victory right now, and I'm just so appreciative. But it's going to take me a second to process it and be like, okay, you have 22 years for him. Now let's move forward with who has continued to do this after.
Thank you very much, Athena. I really appreciate you talking to Lester. And I was just starting to speak with the Minneapolis resident right before the hearing came back. And ma'am, hi, how are you? Yeah, they gave 22 and a half years, ma'am. That's what they just gave him. So the word is trickling out here, Lester. Ma'am, what's your immediate reaction? Derek Chauvin sentenced to 22 and a half years in prison.
Maybe he's setting an example out of other dirty cops here. It's bad what he did, but he's not shot other black men here. They say he has no criminal charges, which is true. But the police they didn't charge him for.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us. I know it's kind of hard to get some information here, but 22 and a half years. Thank you very much, ma'am. So Lester, again, kind of a situation here where we're trying to get as much reaction as we can. And again, word is starting to trickle out. The judge said the sentence first in months, so people are trying to make the calculation here again to 22 and a half years. But, sir, the situation here, the sentence just handed down 22 and a half years. We just spoke with this gentleman from Chicago. What's your reaction?
Guilty was served. I don't think that that's enough time to send a message that needs to be sent to say that justice is trying to work for people of color. It's a dent, but we still feel empty today. We feel empty because it still feels like twisted justice, in which we're all so accustomed to, But we did get a guilty, and then we did get time. But we just feel void today. It still feels void.
Thank you very much, sir. So, Lester, again, some conflicting feelings here. Some folks, you may be able to hear somebody behind me. There was a bit of anger here that they wanted more. Certainly, many people in this community, they wanted the maximum, up to 40 years. Legal experts, of course, said that wasn't likely. Prosecutors asked for 30 years. So, again, 22 and a half years for Derek Chauvin on that second-degree murder charge. A mixed reaction so far. Some people saying it was enough. Some they wanted more than 20 at least. Others, as you can hear in the distance, perhaps there's some anger. They wanted more, Lester. So we're continuing to get reaction here as this crowd continues to grow. But for now, we're going to send it back to you, Lester.
All right, Gabe, thanks very much. 22 and a half years. That would put Mr. Chauvin at 67 when he is released from prison. Let's go to Paul Butler right now. Paul, is this in the neighborhood of where you thought the judge might come down in this case?
It's actually higher, Lester. The judge essentially threw the book at Mr. Chauvin. 22 years, that's a new precedent in Minnesota. The only other officer to be convicted of murder in that state got 12 and a half years. So the judge said his sentence was about legal analysis, not about emotion or sympathy. And he specifically said he was not trying to send a message. But make no mistake, this case will impact other officers. This is a tough sentence. Mr. Chauvin will not see the light of day for decades. And hopefully that will impact how other officers approach their jobs, knowing that when they violate their badge, abuse the public trust in the way that Mr. Chauvin did, there will be serious consequences.
All right, Paul Butler, thank you for being part of our coverage. That concludes our breaking news coverage of the sentencing of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. We'll have much more, of course, when I see you back here for NBC Nightly News. For now, I'm Lester.